Hello, welcome to Zoomster Politics, and welcome to my very first video on this channel. Today I'm going to be doing a prediction for the 2024 presidential election. Before we get into a lot of things, I want to just go over some ground things about this channel and about everything about me and what my ratings mean. So, my name is Jay the Zoomster. I do videos on another channel, but today I'm focusing entirely on my other passion, which is electoral politics. The major thing that you need to know about me is that I'm trying to go into this as unbiased as possible. What that means is I'm going to be disregarding my own opinions about each candidate, and I'm simply going to talk about how I feel like they're going to do throughout the entire United States. This may fly in the face of some things I might say on twitter.com or in the comment section of these videos, or things I might say in other videos as regards to my actual political beliefs. But as far as these predictions go, I'm going to do it purely based off how I think things are going. That does not always mean I'm going to follow polls exactly, because I don't believe polling averages are exactly everything that you need to follow when it comes to an election. I think there's state trends and several other things that are very important. So just a forewarning right there. Secondly, I'm not going to be rating these based off of margin. I know a lot of people will rate them as tilt for like under 1 point, likely for like 9 points, and safe for 10 points. What the margins are going to mean for me is that tilt is going to mean that I'm unsure about it. It's my replacement for toss-ups, because I don't really want to do toss-up. I think I need to make a judgment for every single state in the nation. I think that lean is going to be, I'm fairly confident in it going that way, but it's still competitive. Likely means there's roughly no chance unless there's a landslide of either party's side, and safe means that there's virtually no chance barring some catastrophic change. Without further ado, let's go ahead and cover every single safe state, starting with the Democratic side. So of course, as far as safe states go, you have to start with the West Coast. I feel with Washington, Oregon, California, and Hawaii. I feel like those states are very easily going to go to Harris, and there's really no competition in any of them. Another state now, as we're going to move a little bit over, is going to be the state of Colorado. Joe Biden won it by a very large 10-point margin in 2020. The state has trended extremely Democratic. I don't think Trump has anywhere close to a shot here. Now, New Mexico, I'm going to say likely. I have a feeling that this state is closer to safe than likely, and closer to the election, I could very well change my opinion on the state into safe. I don't think I'm ever going to be moving it toward lean. However, I feel like likely is a very good scenario for it, because I feel like in a landslide scenario, or just a scenario where Trump was doing as well as he was back earlier this year with Joe Biden as the nominee, I very well think he could have been in striking distance of New Mexico. Another state like that is the state of Minnesota. I think Minnesota could be argued for lean. However, it was 7 points Democrat in 2020. People say that Tim Walz didn't actually perform that well in 2022, but if you actually look at his performance relative to the shift in the popular vote of the nation, he actually did very well to manage Biden's performance and match it while the rest of the country shifted to the right. So I do think that Minnesota, by all accounts, is a pretty solid state for the Democrats. Not safe, of course. Illinois is going to be a safe state. It's just, it's fairly safe. I don't think this was ever going to flip at all. I've seen some people back when Biden tanked in the debates and the Trump assassination attempt happened. I saw some people that had Illinois in lean to tilt Democratic territory. Some even flipped it. I don't see a reality where that actually occurs. For me, it's very, very, very safe. Moving on to the first East Coast state, we're going to talk about the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia, Joe Biden won it by 10 points in 2020, and it shifted very far to the right from 2021 when Glenn Youngkin won the governorship, as well as the lieutenant governor and attorney general office flipping as well. However, I don't think that that's very indicative of statewide trends in general. I do think that I'm going to have to put the state as a likely state. I don't think that it's very competitive at all. I've seen a couple polls that show it a little bit more competitive. However, they are not high quality polls, and I haven't really even heard of much of them at all. If somebody in the comments wants to say that they are high quality polls and that I should trust them, I could revise this and maybe make it lean. However, right now I just don't see Virginia really changing that much. I think that it's possible Harris wins it by a slimmer margin than 10 points, possibly 8 or 9, but I do think she is very, very favored in the state of Virginia. Maryland and Delaware are of course going to be safe states, as well as New Jersey. We're going to go ahead and say that Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, and Vermont are also going to be safe, as well as DC. When looking at the state of New York, I think as far as margins go, we could see a major shift in New York. It was one state that actually shifted to the right, contrary to the national popular vote in 2020. However, I don't think that really is going to lean into its likeliness to flip to the other side. I think that the margin could be a little closer. I've seen a lot of polls that have it within 20 points. Whether I think it's going to actually be within 20 points, I'm not sure. Kathy Hochul barely won by New York standards. I think she won by about 5 points in 2022. They really could have won the governorship in a better night for Republicans. Just right now, I do think that the state is still safe. Another state I'm going to mark as safe, or rather district, is going to be Maine's 1st district. I'll also have to mark New Hampshire as a likely Democratic state. Again, Joe Biden won it by about 7 points. It trended left relative to the popular vote in the New Hampshire Senate race in 2022. I think that on a very good night, this could have flipped for Trump. It was very close in 2016. It just doesn't make much sense that it would flip. The same I would feel for Maine at large. I think, again, maybe there's a scenario where it could flip. Very possible that it could have. It had Biden stayed in the race and things just only got worse for him. Those are the safe states for the Democrats. The last district that I'm going to talk about is going to be Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. I think that this one is going to be the first lean characterization. I think there's a very, very big chance that she does win it. However, I'm not very confident in it being likely. I think even in a moderately good night for Trump, not even a very good night, a moderately good night where he wins the Electoral College, I think there's a very, very real chance that he could win this district. I don't think it's out of reach at all for him, quite like some of the likely or safe states are. However, I do think that Harris is definitely favored. Moving on to the safe states for Donald Trump and the Republicans, we're going to start with Idaho, Wyoming, North Dakota, South Dakota, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Missouri, Alabama, Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, Indiana, Utah, Kansas, South Carolina, Nebraska at large, and the other districts within Nebraska, as well as the state of Montana. I will also put the state of Alaska as the first likely Republican state. This might be crazy. However, with ranked choice voting, I do think that there could, emphasis on could, very slim chance, but I have to include it. There is a chance that ranked choice voting could come out. Do I think it's going to happen? No, which is why it is likely Republican. But I think that in a specific night and with specific circumstances, that could very easily happen. Other likely states for Donald Trump and the Republicans are going to be Ohio, Iowa, Maine's 2nd district, and the state of Florida and Texas. Those are states that I really do not see flipping, at least this time and this go around. Florida has only gotten redder from 2020, in which it shifted very far to the right relative to the national popular vote, with Donald Trump winning by about 3.5 points, and Miami-Dade County even flipping in 2022 for Governor Ron DeSantis. I don't see the state coming back at all this election. I think Trump will actually win it by a very large margin. I debated putting this in the safe category. However, I do think, given the history of it and the fact that I put, certain states like New Mexico in the likely column as opposed to safe, I think that in a phenomenal night for Harris, she could pick up Florida, Texas, Iowa, and Ohio. I just do not think that it is likely in the slightest right now. We've reached the main 7 swing states of the election. Nothing else here is going to be likely. Everything else is going to be lean or tilt. So we're going to be starting with my confidence in every state. First off, the state of Michigan. I'm fairly confident in the state of Michigan, given the fact that, again, it trended to the left relative to the popular vote in 2022, with Gretchen Whitmer winning by 10 points. I think that Michigan is probably the best chance Biden had at retaining any of his major swing states, and I think Harris only makes Michigan an easier retainment for the Democrats. I think, if anything, Michigan was probably the biggest fluke of 2016, and I don't think that Republicans are going to be able to really come back within striking distance here very often. I could be wrong. That's why it's in lean. I think in a night where Trump does win the Electoral College, I think he most likely does win Michigan if he wins by a decent amount. However, currently, I do think that Michigan is likely to go to Harris. I'm going back to my confidence. I'm going to move to the state of Arizona, and I'm going to say that is also likely to go to Donald Trump. It has shifted to the left Very much so. Again, Mark Kelly did very well. Katie Hobbs won in 2022. I just feel like currently, right now, the trends that I'm seeing and a lot of the polling suggest that Harris is not doing super well in Arizona compared to the rest of the country. So I feel like in my gut right now, and based on everything I'm seeing with polling and every other expert's analysis of the state, I do think that there's a pretty solid chance that it goes to Donald Trump. Again, it's very likely that it could go to Harris, but I think right now I'm fairly confident in it going to Donald Trump. He'll only win it by about maybe half a point to a point, but I think that he will secure the 11 electoral votes of Arizona. Another state that I'm going to mark as lean is going to be the state of Nevada. I think that Donald Trump had right now at this point in time at the election we're held today, I think he does win Nevada. It has been one of the states that has been polling the absolute worst for Democrats. Back when Joe Biden was in the race, there were polls multiple times that had Donald Trump up 10 points there. And ever since Harris stumped into the race, the polling in that state has not even really budged that much. So either polling is going to be absolutely wrong and completely catastrophically wrong in Nevada, or the state is going to flip to the Republicans. I don't think Trump's going to win it by a lot, probably around 1 point if he does end up pulling it out. But the state has trended to the right in every subsequent election, really. They flipped the governor's race in 2022, and the Democrat barely won the Senate election that year. So currently, I do think that Nevada is going to go to Donald Trump. Again, maybe polling is disastrously wrong. It is a state Republicans have tried to grab so many times before, and it hasn't panned out, but I do think that this could be the year that they do it. All right, now every other state right now is tilt. Tilt states are the ones that I'm least confident about. I am not confident at all, but I don't want to leave toss-ups because I feel like for my judgment, I should make a call for every state. So let's start with the Donald Trump toss-up state of North Carolina. He won the state by about 1 point in 2020. There is a very, very competitive governor's race here that doesn't look super competitive based off polls. I do think the Democrat will win the governor's election in North Carolina, and I think he'll win it by a decent amount. And I think that could have some up ballot effects actually on the presidential race. It's not going to be enough to flip the state, in my opinion. I do think that Donald Trump will secure the Tar Heel state and win 16 electoral votes from it, but it will be very slim. If I had to guess a margin, it would be around probably half a point. Around 30,000, 50,000 votes, roughly, I would say. I think that the demographic changes here have been pretty good for Democrats. I've seen people point out voter registration, and I very well could be wrong, and he could win it by a higher percentage. I think right now, though, this is a state where polling has overestimated Democrats, so I'm not putting too much stock in good polls for Harris. However, the governor's race, I do think, has a very strong chance of having up ballot effects, even if it doesn't end up flipping the state. Now, the rest of the states aren't really going to, for me, have too much analysis in them because I'm just kind of going with what my vibes say right now. I think the state of Wisconsin is going to be tilt toward Kamala Harris. I think that she will most likely pull a very narrow win out of the state. I'm talking like maybe under half a point, probably about 0.3%. Very, very slim in the state of Wisconsin. That's just where my gut is right now. Some polling is here. Polling in 2016 and 2020 was the worst in Wisconsin. There's definitely a hard reach of Trump supporters, probably in this driftless area right here where my cursor is. It's very hard to get people from over there to answer. But in both elections, Hillary in 2016 and Joe Biden in 2020, they were polling very well in Wisconsin, and Wisconsin ended up being the one to have the biggest miss and ended up being Trump's best state out of the three Rust Belt states both times. So there is a reality where Donald Trump does pull a win out of Wisconsin, and it's not even a reality that I'm that shocked if it happened. I think that right now, though, I do think that if the environment continues this way, I do think Harris will win the state of Wisconsin. Another state that I think that she'll pull out a very narrow win in is the state of Georgia. Georgia has very good demographics for Democrats. It has trended extremely to the left in the past couple of elections. Even though the governor's race went to Brian Kemp by about 7 points, Raphael Warnock still would have won even without the runoff in the state of Georgia. I think that the demographics here are just too big to surmount right now, but I do think that it's going to be very close. I think Harris probably improves upon Joe Biden by a itty bitty teensy margin, probably going up from 0.3% to about 0.5% of the vote as far as her winning margin. This is a state that the closer we get to the election, I will probably move it into lean for either of the two parties just because I'll be getting more confident, but right now it's very hard for me to pick. I think it and North Carolina probably vote the same of each other but in opposite directions. So I think that Donald Trump probably wins North Carolina by a half a point, and I think Kamala Harris probably wins Georgia by about a half a point. The last state on here is the state of Pennsylvania, the state I'm the least confident about in the entire election, and of course it's the most important state. If you give it to Donald Trump, he wins with 271 electoral votes to 267. If you give it to Harris, she wins with 286 to 252. Currently, I do think that it is very much tilting toward Kamala Harris. I think that right now, if the election were held today and current trends continue, I do think that she will eke out a win by election day, probably within half a point. I think the Philadelphia area and suburbs are very strong for her, and while she will lose support throughout the middle of the state, I think that it's going to be enough for her to eke out a win in the state. I think as long as turnout doesn't crater like it did in 2016 for Hillary Clinton, that there's a very big chance that she does win the state and therefore the election. So there you go. There's my first presidential election for 2024. I have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz at 286 electoral votes, and Donald Trump and J.D. Vance at 252 electoral votes. Pennsylvania is the most important race. Donald Trump wins that. He wins the election. Kamala Harris loses it. She loses the election. However, there could be a scenario where, you give Donald Trump Pennsylvania and Kamala Harris could pick up North Carolina, and that kind of equals out. However, currently that's just not how I could see it going. I mean, she could also get 16 or 17 votes from Nevada and Arizona, but currently I have those going toward Donald Trump. There's also the potential that Donald Trump could win the state of Wisconsin, which wouldn't get him there, but would get him a lot closer to where he would only have to win Georgia instead of Pennsylvania. This is my final prediction. If you watch this video, drop in the comments down below your prediction. If you think I got anything wrong, let me know, and I'm very excited to continue my journey of politics.